So Alexis, what are you watching on Netflix these days?
Oh, that's a ooh, okay.
If anything at all.
I'm like, ooh, okay. No, I like the thing is I can't remember what's on Netflix versus what's on, like what's on this.
Sure.
But right now I really, really like Abbott Elementary. Have you heard of that or seen that? I don't know if it's Netflix though. I'm just gonna tell you. Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's just about in Philly. It's just about a school.
Born and
Anyways,
raised? Yeah.
I'm also watching the new Fresh Prince, which
that looks pretty great.
It's really good. It's like dark and mysterious, but it still is. It's not slapstick comedy. It's really good.
It looks really good.
You definitely have a reason you're asking me this, and I'm not.
Of course, yeah. I was going to suggest that maybe you watch Our Blues on Netflix. Have you heard of it?
Oh my gosh! Now that you say it, I'm like, wait a minute. What is it about?
It seems actually really interesting as opposed to some of other.
It's Korea, right?
K-pop.
It's K-pop
set on Jeju, and it's 20 episodic episodes about people who come here or live here, who are from here, and of course, it's a romance and stuff like this. But each episode's about different people. Like they're not so. Yeah. So Jeju itself is like the main character.
Okay. Right. I did get advertised that on Netflix and I thought, this is either really good or really not. I don't know. Have you heard, not to get us off subject, but I do want to bring up, do you know that there is a show based around the GEC right now? The Global Education International Schools? Yes. It's this reality fake show that they're following the moms of the GEC people around.
That's so fun. I always wanted to write a short story about the mothers in that community, right?
Yeah, well, you should write a short because it's intriguing. But a lot of the teachers are just like, okay.
Well, you have to find out the name of that show.
Okay, I will, and I'll share it with the audience. But Our Blues, I wonder how many of our listeners are, because I did get advertised that, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is really Jeju or if it's just like, a fake Jeju.
Only 2 episodes have published so far, or been like.
Have you watched them?
I just heard of the show the other day, doing research
so
and stuff.
We need to watch them, and we need to report. And any audience members need to tell us if they're listening.
Exactly, right? But watching. One of the stories is about a woman. It sounds ridiculous, this one, but they're not all so ridiculous. But a woman who comes to the mainland, becomes a henyo, because apparently you could just come to the main.
Yeah, because it's so easy. But also to get into the henyo classes is really competitive. So just doubly telling people it's not easy to become a henyo.
And she's like a bar owner at night, apparently, as well. And she falls in love with somebody. Because you can
swim all day and then go work the bar.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But another one's about like a businessman from the mainland who comes back to Jeju, and it's all about love and
establishing his roots. Is it actually filmed in Jeju? Did you see or hear that?
70% of it was filmed on Jeju.
Okay.
And it started like in October 2021 of my remember. Yeah.
All right.
But
I'm going to make this a research. I'm going to make a research topic, and we can talk about this next time. Also, for our listeners, sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather, and my cat just had a freak out. Sorry if you're hearing my cat or my froggy voice.
No. Please, listeners, comment not on her froggy voice, because it doesn't actually sound that froggy.
I feel it sounds fine. As soon as I said that, now I feel like I need a cough and
but
excuse me.
We should literally watch these and have like a 5-minute talk about them if we have time.
And because if we can squeeze it in. I'm intrigued. I'm totally intrigued.
Yeah, this sounds better.
Hey, listen, there's been enough movies and music videos that have been recorded here. Hopefully it gives a nice touch of Jeju. But you know what also I don't want off of this show? Do you know how there's those special places that everybody lines up to go take Instagram photos? Because this is where this person and this person kissed in the movie, or this is where, so that's all over Jeju. And I'll often be driving by and I'll just see like a random place on the sea, on the seawall. And I'm like, why is everyone lined up? And then I'll ask one of my friends and they're like, oh, because this was filmed there. And
is that I actually was working on an article years ago about, there was that television show called The Guardian or something. It was weird. Somebody traveled back in time or something.
I barely remember that one. Yeah.
I was interested in how those shows get made because it was shot in Montreal, my alma mater where I went to university. And so I started calling up some people and I found out there's a bidding process to choose locations. And they pay for right?
So they want to be
damn straight.
Oh, I wonder if Jeju gets. I do imagine Jeju probably would get some money off of that, don't you think?
Well, no. So Montreal paid the movie, the television show.
That is not what I was thinking.
No, yeah.
I was like, maybe the movie production pays to be here.
And there was this red door in that show. That red door is now famous because there was a scene shot by that red door, and Korean and Chinese and other K-pop aficionados flock to this red door to take their pictures, right? And people want to go to this hotel where the thing was shot, the show was shot. So I find that just to add on to what you're talking about, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, again, because you see these places and they'll have oftentimes there'll be like a little placard. Is that the right word? Why do I always question?
Placard is correct. Yeah, it's okay.
Weird, there'll be like a little placard that just kind of identifies like this movie in this date was shot here. But I never noticed that. I just noticed the line of people waiting to get to this certain point, and
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's so much stuff actually shot on Jeju all the time. That
countless stuff that you don't even know, and especially music videos that you have no idea, only to like someone will point it out and I'll be like, yep, that was definitely Jungmoon, or yep, that was definitely, this
right.
And,
what was that? The band, the 1,000 Girls.
Oh, that was really popular. Twice.
They shot at the cliff.
Girls. Please don't piss off any K-pop listeners.
So there's a lot of girls in this band, right?
All right, let's keep moving on. I don't want to upset any armies out there.
Forgiveth me.
We don't want to get on the wrong side of that. Yeah, but exactly. That was a really popular video.
I like seeing Jungmoon and Jeju in stuff. It makes me like, look.
Here we go.
Famous.
Here we go.
Yeah. Anyways, now I think it's about time. Jeju Dialect Corner with Joo-young Han.
Asa.
And now it's time for another segment of our Jeju Dialect Corner with our teacher, Sansingnim Joo-young Han. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's wonderful to see you again. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Can't complain. I get to speak to you. I'm very happy.
This is true. I always look forward to our lessons. Hi, Juju.
Hi. And I'm actually extra excited. I'm excited today because the other day I was, Googling, what to teach, to you guys. And I typed like Jeju dialect, on Google. And I came across the word ole, as in ole trays. And I think you guys must have heard of ole tray at least once, and I thought it would be really good to explain what it means. And so ole means the small, private alley to, leading to your house from the street. So ole trail is like one of the best ways to enjoy the beautiful scenery all around Jeju Island, right? So basically, ole trails consist of bunch of oles, to other, you walk by other people's, houses and stuff like that. So and also the mascot of Ole Trail is a Jeju pony, and its name is Ganse.
Ganse.
Yeah, Ganse means lazy or idle, So it has a little bit, moving? It has a little bit negative connotation, but like in Ole trails, like you are supposed to be relaxing, it's the Ole trail is not for the, like finishing the trail, like not
a race.
Not a race.
Yeah.
So you are, supposed to sit around, sit and look around and take in everything, what Jeju offers. And it basically says it's okay to be ganse, when you
That's
walk,
awesome.
along the ole trails.
It's permission.
So I really like it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
just
do you think that Gansei now is starting to sound a little bit more positive to people based on how popular the Olay trails are?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
More like slow moving versus lazy?
Only,
No.
yeah, like relating to ole trails, as like the pony
only
represents,
only in that context.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And
because
just
when we like, for example, when my parents ask me to do something for them, I like sometimes don't want to do it, like I walk really slow, and things like that. So my parents would say, don't be ganse, move quick,
Move
yeah.
quickly. Could I say that to like a young student in a fun way, or would that be absolutely not appropriate? No, like I wouldn't be yelling at them. I would say it in a very teasing manner.
Yeah, you can use that. Like, so for example, don't be ganse, work, study hard, or
okay,
like that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna incorporate that into my lessons.
Like if in English, I mean, or maybe it's just my house. Like if you called somebody a lazy butt, like that isn't necessarily like it's kind of an endearing kind of like you wouldn't say that to somebody harshly or something. Could you call that? Could you call somebody ganse gan? Like how would you use that as an adjective?
간세. So it's like I don't know. It can be 간세 하지 마. 간세 부리지 마. Don't be ganse.
Okay,
I think.
So not an
or
adjective.
It can be a noun.
Right.
As 간세다리.
간세다리?
Yeah. So it's a person who's lazy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
And quickly, just for the uninitiated, the Ole trails, some people may not really know. We already mentioned the trails, but they're a huge trail network that goes across the circumference of the island. And how many are there now? There's like
20
something, 22, I think. Yeah.
Didn't they just add? It's hard to keep. They just added that one a couple years ago, a year ago.
And to prove your point, right? Like when you go on them, there are like old farmers' trails.
Yes.
That were like
literally
abandoned and so forth. And Yoon Seok-yool, the founder, she kind of found them again. I like, and the army helped dig some of them. It was a massive project to get some of them going. But a lot of work so we could be gansei on them, right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, but boom.
Hey-yo.
That was perfect. You're such a teacher's pet, though. Really, you really are such a teacher's pet.
Yeah, that completely explains my terrible high school marks then. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jeju, that was really, really good because I don't know one person that doesn't enjoy the Olay. So I think that's just like a little nice knowledge for our listeners. Thank you for that.
And so the words
another
are
good episode. Yeah.
Ole, Ole as an Ole Gil, and Gansei Dari.
I'm gonna say that because I never get a chance to show how bad I am at Korean. Gansei Dari.
Yeah, it was great.
Ole, yeah.
Ole. Okay.
Gansei Dari.
Perfect.
I love it.
And maybe some of our listeners may be listening to our podcast as they do the trails right now.
Ooh, that's exciting to think about.
Yeah,
it's okay to be ganse. Walk slow.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah, thank you, Joo-young. That was great. And that was another great lesson from our teacher, Joo-young Han. Thank you so much. I can never show her enough appreciation for like.
I was just thinking the same thing. Like, like I just love that she thought, and it's just going so well. And every time she sends us an idea, and she's like, well, what about this? I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
The Olay and now that, I mean, I never knew that that's what that word meant. Gansei. Yeah, I didn't know. You see the horse all over the island. Everybody gets like there. I even have friends that have tattoos of the horse because they've done all the olays and it's just like a little memento.
Now you could be like, did you know that means you're lazy?
Yeah, I just think that's so. I'm just so grateful as well to her. Like, and I hope our listeners really appreciate that segment as well. It's a lot of work for her.
Yeah, no, yeah. And she's the one who does that, just so our listener knows.
Yeah.
I didn't know that horse had a name. Did you?
I did. Well, I just thought I did know, because I knew I had heard of Ganse. I just didn't relate. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't put them all together. Like, I knew that that's what that was called, because they talk about it on the Ole trails quite a bit on the placards and stuff. Yeah.
And so now I'd like to, again, thank you all for your support for our special 2 episodes that we actually put a lot of time into, and we had a great.
We really did, Darryl. You really did. Yeah, it's hard to. I was just talking to my best friend back home, and she listens to our podcast, even though she's like, I love hearing about the place you live. And then she's like, I haven't caught up on the last few. And she was talking about Jeju Sasam, and she was like, it just seems like such a topic. And then we started talking about our primer and how much. I was like, listen to this so you can really understand. I said, but just know that that's just like a tip of the iceberg. That it's not even covering how extensive.
Like I think about how to try to talk about the massacre. Like I'm writing about it currently. I'm trying to. I've interviewed people. I'm trying to put their stories into short story kind of form, but nonfiction. And how do I convey what the massacre was and how, to people who don't know about it, right? Like in English, it's very difficult.
Constantly. And so, like you said, and Darryl, you really put a lot of work into that, because you can't just take this big subject and then you'd be like, okay, we're just going to give you the highlights, which is what we attempted to do. So I hope everyone really felt educated by that.
And just so you guys know, I follow a couple of specific hashtags about the massacre: Jeju 4-3, Jeju massacre, Jeju uprising, Jeju incident. And so I see all the tweets. Anybody who mentions those words, I see all those tweets.
They come through,
It's interesting to note that in English, the only time people really talk about the massacre is to blame America, to support communism, or those are the main, to say that, or to bash South Korea. Like some Chinese people mention it offhandedly in the debates about, Hamburg or whatever. There's just the feud between them.
Let's not even get into that.
Look at all the massacres that South Korea did to themselves. And then you got
so real derogatory. Okay.
Oh yeah. People never it's very infrequently mentioned just on its own. It's always used as evidence in an argument, which I always thought was interesting. And people get the information wrong all the time because
that's
to support.
Because I only follow especially on Instagram. So I follow the dark tours, the 4-3, because I want to see what ceremonies they're holding, and they'll do educational posts. So, but that's only obviously
pictures,
educational, and so I don't. Wow, that's really interesting to. Well, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but talking about that, you were just talking to me. You have President Moon came again, huh?
Well, no, actually, President Moon didn't came. He gave remarks. It was President-elect. Yeah,
because you had said something, and I thought that would be really strange that they both came. At the same. Okay, so he didn't come this year.
Yeah, we published on our Instagram account. Please like and subscribe. About the speech, his remarks, which are his final remarks about Sasam. He came 3 times, right?
He came,
and he was the first
president,
since Roe came, right? And he came which is 12 years after or something ridiculous.
Yeah, remind our listeners what do you remember the year that he came down?
2018.
And it wasn't even 2018. And it wasn't even, and to remind, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm often wrong, because it gets all mixed up in my head. But he didn't even come down for 3. It was the peace talks.
Oh, you're talking about the first apology?
Yeah.
That was on October 31st, 2003. He gave an apology then. And then I think in 2006, he came for the first time to the park.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the next time was Moon.
Yeah. Moon. I felt especially I really want to talk about that. Thank you for translating, by the way, for our listeners. Darryl translated that. He and his family, right? Translated that from
just me, just
yours. Really?
Truly.
Oh, hey.
And Google.
Yeah,
and Google
translated that from Korean to English. And I'll tell you what, I felt especially I guess I felt a little choked up reading what Moon had to say.
Yeah.
I remember very clearly when the first time he came down here, and it was a really big deal for him to come and go to the Peace Park and be part of the 4-3 ceremony.
Yeah.
And so now that his term is over, 5 years has ended, and for him to just I felt quite choked up about it. I thought that was really touching. Yeah. What was his last thing he said? I wish I had it in front of me. Sorry, listeners, but it was just like, in the last 5 years, it's been an honor to come, to come down.
Yeah, to be a part of Jeju 4-3.
Yeah. He really under his, not just him, but his
administration.
My brain. Thank you. My brain just shut up. But under him and his administration, there was a lot of progress.
Yeah.
That was made, and it's really important to, no matter what your politics are, it's really important to acknowledge that he really impacted. What his party passed the revision to which is really bureaucratic, and a lot of people, like, the articles don't really mention what it means because it's just pure bureaucracy, but it does affect people here, and it has to work for compensation. Greatly affect.
Yeah, but Yoon came. Yeah, Yoon came, which is Yoon Seok-yool, the president-elect, came, and this was actually
also really important,
super important, because he's the first conservative president. Like Park. I can't believe I can't remember her name. Daughter of Park Chung-hee.
Yeah. I was like, oh,
the disgrace, the once jailed, recently released Park. Yeah, I can't think of her name. So Yoon came, and that was like the first conservative president to visit the ceremony, and it signals that, like, going forward, like, it'll be a thing if they don't come at least once, right?
I agreed. It's kind of laying down again that this needs to happen. Yeah,
and apparently it was a campaign promise he made in February that he would come here as part of it, and he gave like the same speech, like it sounds cliched to me, but it doesn't to people here when he say things like restore the honor, because that's just not in our vocabulary, in our sort of way. Westerners.
Yeah, but I do, having lived here, and you know this, having lived here for so long, you do start to recognize that way of speaking, which is obviously important. And I think, anyways, to focus on, I don't find I don't find him a great speaker.
What?
Per se.
Korea's Trump? You don't think of him as a great orator?
Again, in my head, I'm like, don't make anyone angry. No, I don't find him a great speaker. What I really focused on was that I was just pleased that he showed, and he made that, he made that something. He kept his promise in the campaign. He came down, and all I focus on is Jeju needs that. The survivors need that
very much.
So that's what I kind of keep in mind. Never mind his awkward
well, the Association of Bereaved Families of Jeju 4-3 actually commented on what you were saying, that they said that national integration begins from accepting the healing of the past, right? And this has been a party.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That hasn't acknowledged and hasn't. Yeah.
And they
talked about that in our we talked about that in our primer episode where it just is, when they had decided that they wanted to come down to say something, the other party wanted to rewrite his apology. Oh
no, they wanted to they had a lot of things about the report,
the draft, right?
And then 18 people of the committee resigned the day it was accepted in protest, right? Because it blamed the military and police, and so it's a really big deal. I mean, really, it really is. So it was nice to see that that's the way he's starting off his term. I'll try to get his speech and put it up too. It's a little more difficult because, like, on President Moon, he's the president, so it's on there's like a website and stuff. He didn't.
He's got the Twitter as well.
Yeah, if you go to Yoon's Twitter right now, actually, as of this recording, his latest tweet is from April 3rd in Jeju of the tombstones and of Hala, and of cherry blossoms and things like that. So if you go check his Twitter,
I will.
Tweets again.
Well, they'll be putting him on the national service, right? Soon.
They'll be changing the website, all that kind of stuff, right? But and now that since we're talking about Yoon and Jeju, it's interesting that in like the last week or so, it's been his
He's
party
setting
and
his admin
himself.
up.
Yeah, well, he's setting up like his administration.
Yeah.
And Yoon tapped former Jeju Governor Hee-ryong to be the Minister of Land Transport, which is interesting.
Mind-boggling, but
Yeah,
no, it's not mind-boggling because you could foresee it coming. But for anyone,
what are your first thoughts on this? Because I have a couple, of course. So what are your thoughts?
Listen, I've met Juan numerous times over the year, and he is an extremely likable person. He's very vibrant. He's real active in the community. When I met him many times, he has a presence.
Yeah.
Not a fan of the politics, not a fan of how what has happened on Jeju under his administration, but and so for him to be in particular this title, this particular seat that he will be filling, you're just like, well, there we go. We go.
Have I mentioned that he's from Jungmun, my current
I did not know
resident?
that.
Yeah, he was a big shot here. Yeah. Right. So he was graduated top of the school and top of everything and top.
He was just a big shot in general. That was the first governor that I remember that people really, he was kind of like a little superstar down here versus the past governors that I didn't really know much about or didn't have a real big impact. There's always scandal on Jeju. There's always scandal, and with him as well. But he's kind of like he was well known.
Of the previous three governors, because one of them was governor for like 5 freaking terms, right?
Yes, he was forever and ever and ever. Amen.
And he's now escaped to Canada because he's wanted on. Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah. Well, people that don't realize Jeju is just a hotbed of scandals. Like you think America, or you think like other places. That Jeju is like drama. There could be a reality show about the Jeju scandals, but Juan himself has partaken in quite a few scandals, which is why I'm a little disappointed, which, you could go into further detail about. Yeah.
I'm not, well, it's interesting because I had 2 thoughts when I heard that he ran for president and lost in the primary, and to run, he resigned from governor to try to get this
in the middle of COVID.
Yeah. Which is,
everyone loved that.
And the Korean Herald reported that his nomination is a huge surprise, saying that like he doesn't have expertise in land development or anything like that, which I thought was weird because
that is weird because
Jeju.
Look around Jeju. All the development that has happened is because he allowed it to happen, and he signed deals with so many different companies to pave Jeju under.
And my theory, this is like, I don't have any proof to support this, so let's caveat that, is that when he joined the Yoon as a senior advisor, the Yoon campaign, I wonder if that was like a stipulation, like, let me be the Ministry of Land, because that's often happens. You do get something Buttigieg became the transport. Support. Yeah,
absolutely. So you think that was part of it?
I think specifically the Ministry of Land, right? Because he wants to probably make a push for president 5 or 10 years from now. And it's what he did during the campaign is it's crazy because Lee Jae-myung was the competitor, right? And Juan led a campaign like this, kind of trying to make a scandal of saying he was involved in this 25. Yeah, it's kind of complicated. It's like a land.
He accused. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he was building on accusations that other people made when he was the mayor of Songnam, I think. I have my notes down here. I should check that. And like in the lead up days before the election, Juan was like, I have this satchel. And in this satchel, and I'm dramatizing, he didn't do any of that. But he got all these documents that apparently further incriminated Lee, and the satchel came to the party, the People's Party, the Conservative Party, from an anonymous person who found this bag by a sewer grate by a highway. And Juan was like, some of the pages are damaged, and
I'm telling you, that's what I mean when I say it could be an actual reality show. It could be an actual reality show. Yeah. But I think with him coming with the airport, it's a done deal. It's a done deal.
That's my first thought too. The airport getting built.
110%. There is, I always knew it was going to get built, right? Like I knew it, but now I feel like we just fast forwarded. There's not even going to be any more talk. I can, like I predict it's going to happen even very soon.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did a little bit of not research, but like reading and tried to gather some stuff because this is actually a really pivotal time in the airport. So just to get people back on track, the environment ministry kind of kiboshed the airport plan back in July. Due to environmental concerns, like it'll threaten animals that currently endangered of extinction. And there were it's not like kibosh completely, just that plan was come back, revise it. That plan is due in June. Now,
right around the corner.
And the residents of Songsan, those who support the airport, actually had a press conference when one was announced. And they said that he's the most qualified person for this Ministry of Land position, right? And they want it's fascinating, and especially as an outsider, like
I know what you mean.
Because it's like Gangjang again, because a Gallup poll found that 65% of Songsan residents want the airport, but 47% of Jeju people don't
want it, right? Which is where it is really half and half, which is really interesting. But
43% of people said they want it, right? Of Jeju, but that's a large majority of people in Songsan that don't want it, and it's and one does. It's been a thing that he's been pushing. So
absolutely. I mean, and but like I said, I feel like that was the last nail in the coffin for. And must be felt Jeju wide. Like the protesters must have just been like, "Oh, righty then," because honestly, that's it. It's it. So I'll eat my shoe if come later. But I really, as soon as I heard that announcement that's what his position was, I was like, well, all right, there we go. We go.
And I think he's going to use it to run for, because I think objectively. Monetarily, the airport will be a success when it's built.
Oh, of course. But for the locals and for when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine having to go down there to get off I guess it's different for you, but the whole cities are based around the airport, right? Getting the business hotels, the business office hotels, everything is based around the location. So now this it will be a whole thing.
They want to, it's part of a bigger development plan. They're going to build this, it's going to become a big city there.
It's going to be a huge thing.
Right?
And it's just going to change the dynamics completely of how the island operates, what town is. It'll be really interesting too to see with tourism now will be opening back up, and I think they said come May, right? That we won't be walking around with, even if you have COVID, you can just walk around. Anyways, we're about to see tourism pick back up, even international tourism. It will be picking up, and that's just going to change the dynamics of Shinjeju, of all, that city was built around the airport, and the pedestrian mall and all that. The whole dynamics of the island will be changing.
I should know this off the top of my head, but is that going to be the international terminal or the domestic?
I fear saying no. I think that what the issue is that's going to be the domestic terminal,
right?
Which is interesting.
I thought they were going to make that I'll have to look into that.
We should look into that before we
figure that out.
Yes,
right?
Our listeners wrong. But I remember but it has gone back and forth. But I remember thinking, well, this is just going to be getting to an airport just to go to, Seoul or Busan is going to be.
That would suck.
Ridiculous. Yeah, that would totally suck. So yeah.
And imagine how many more rental cars will be on Jeju when that thing gets built.
For whatever reason, yesterday, excuse my language, listeners, it was a shit show on the roads yesterday. It was,
my pearls.
It was, and you can now see, anyways, the tourists were always coming down through COVID, but for whatever reason, yesterday was the whole time I was in my car, I was just like, just get home. Don't yell out your window, Alexis. Keep your hands on the wheel, Alexis. I don't know. Anyways,
we'll get back to this airport stuff because it's really interesting and it's going to be a big ongoing topic that'll like in June. In June.
Yep.
That is when the next report will come up. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But now it's about time to go to our interview.
I'm excited.
So for those who have been to the island and have traversed its many roads, images are everywhere here, from murals to pictures to art. It's everywhere. Now with us is Grant Leuning, a PhD candidate in communications at San Diego University of California, San Diego, to talk a little bit about his research into the images of Jeju. So thank you very much for being with us today, all the way from San Diego, Grant.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We were introduced to Grant via our good buddy of the show, Joey, who you had met several years ago, I guess, at this point, right, Grant?
Yeah, I think 2019.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's really great to see you finally after all the correspondence we've done online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. And since you are studying the images of Jeju, why did you decide, or what was it about Jeju that made you want to look into this aspect of the island?
Well, I had lived here and I had visited as a tourist, and I had a week or two off, and I decided to bike around Jeju. I thought that would be like the coolest thing. I'm from the middle of North America, Minnesota, as far as you can get from an ocean. So the idea of just being by an ocean and spending every day by the ocean was so cool. So I decided to do a bike trip around, and I just noticed in particular the murals. You know, there were murals everywhere that I went, and I was just fascinated by them. The murals on the city streets and the murals on the sea walls and the murals on the ports, and especially the murals on the fish factories. And I just got obsessed. I wanted to know, why do these exist? What is, some of these murals are enormous. Some of them are beautiful. Some of them are horrible. Why did someone make these things?
Why did someone actually put that? Yeah. Grant, when that became something, you're like, okay, wait a minute. How did you take that from just being interested into actually finding your way to inquire about these? Like, how did you make that leap?
I was really interested in the Hee-ryong, right? Because they are this traditional practice. It's a gendered practice. So it's a woman's practice. It's a very local Jeju practice. Mm-hmm. But the Hee-ryong were also some of the first Koreans to go abroad and to work abroad in the early, even back in the Joseon period.
Yeah.
So there was this kind of practice, but then there was this modern industrial practice where there's a lot of immigrants, a lot of people not from Jeju, but not from Korea, who come and do this work, and almost exclusively male. So, you have these divers who are subject to so many photographs and murals, and then you have the men who are working inside, and there seemed to be a big shift and that had happened between these two kinds of fishing.
Oh, and
go ahead, Darryl.
No, you go first. I can hold on to my question. Alexis froze for a second. So that's fascinating because a lot of people don't actually realize that there are quite a few migrant workers on Jeju in the industry, because you see the foreigner teachers and but there's actually like thousands of people who are working the fields and the farms and the fisheries, as you mentioned. Now, it's interesting about the murals because I saw some of the pictures that you have taken in the work of these faded, old, and sometimes decrepit like murals. Do you know why they were painted and when they were painted and who painted them?
Yes. So there's a whole story to this.
Yeah.
But the short version is around the lead up to 2002 and the Free International City. Jeju realized how many more tourists were going to come. So things had been percolating. There had been murals. The mural on the city hall, I think was the late 90s. It was 97.
Right.
But leading up to 2002, they realized that all of a sudden tourists weren't going to be located in the one or two spaces they had been. Jungmoon being like, that's where the tourists.
The main tourism.
All of a sudden, they were going to be around the island. And these old fish factories had a problem. One, they were really ugly because they're made out of a rebar skeleton and then a concrete skin around it.
Yeah.
And the sea air just pulls the rust out through the concrete. So it bleeds like red metal. And it's so industrial in a place that's marketing itself as very natural and beautiful.
And they are located right by the shore too.
Right on the coastal, the most beautiful coastal roads. And then you just you're just like, oh, and here we are. Yeah.
It's such a symbol of that there were decades where nobody thought that this was a place where people would come. It was just convenient to put the fish factories there. Well, the reason it's convenient is because they need to dump all of the extra water and waste and food at the end of the day, which makes it a perfect place to go fishing. Because when they flush that out, all the fish come, it's great fishing. So they had this problem where the tourists are going to go exactly in the ugliest, most industrial place on Jeju. How do we fix this? So there were several programs. I think the program now is called the Sea Dream. It's run through the fisheries ministry. It's been through several iterations, but they basically do beautification of fisheries.
Of ugly stuff.
Especially in, of now it's mostly the small towns that are more impoverished, and it's doing that kind of beautification
cleanup
work. But so but leading up to 2002, it was these factories, and Nam Jeju, the old Jeju County, or the old South Jeju County before Seogwipo took it over, they invested really heavily in, let's get all of our fish factories painted so we can get these people to come visit. So a lot of them are from this like 2000 to 2004 period, which is why they look really
old,
grungy. They
have not aged well, but
in
a good way. I think some of them in a good way. Yeah.
Do you know how much funding was allotted for this?
I don't know how much funding was allotted for those. The funding schemes are always very complicated, but
yes.
For example, today, if you look at the sort of city murals that are on like the walls of houses or around parks, those are painted for around 70,000 to 150,000 won per meter.
Okay.
And they're professional painters who their whole job is just to paint those things. So extrapolate back through 20 years and inflation and economic growth, it's hard to tell.
That's really fascinating though. Thank you. I'm glad you knew the cost of per meter. That's really interesting.
Grant, when you did start to do that, were you able to meet any of the painters or become acquainted with any of them?
Yeah. So that was one of the most exciting days of my life because I had been, I teach and I study during the year. So the only times I can come are in the summer, and I would usually come later in the summer or during the rainy season when they're not painting. And I think it was 2018, I got to come much earlier than I had before. And I came around a corner and I saw there were 4 guys painting. And I was just like, the people who paint these are here. I found them. I've met them. I had called the phone numbers that are sometimes written on them. Nobody picks up. But, so I finally found the guys who did it. And I just spent almost a month just sitting there with them every day, watching them paint, running to go get them drinks. They let me paint one petal of one flower, which is my favorite petal in Jeju.
Were they confused? Like, why is this foreigner
why is this Wagyu hanging out with us?
Yes. And also because, my questions were kind of about art, but I understood that, this isn't your art practice. This isn't what you love.
Yeah.
And they kept, trying to say like, this is not what I love. This is not my art practice. And I was like, I know. That's why it's interesting.
That's why it's
You know?
interesting. Exactly.
Someone paints a beautiful painting because they love it. I think we all kind of get, okay, that's why you did it. But if you paint hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters of Jeju symbolism, and you're not from Jeju, you don't really care about it, it's just a job. Like, that's a very weird kind of psychology to be in. You have a
Especially
very interesting relationship.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting idea of paintings, the aura these paintings give off. Millions of dollars worth of meh. Let's just all around Jeju.
Exactly. Well, that's not unintentional, because the interesting thing about these murals is that they are mostly designed not to attract your attention, but to repel it.
Oh.
They're designed to sort of let your eye sort of slide off and kind of become generic. And the more murals there have been, right, I'm sure the fewer murals catch your eye.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Because the one in Jeju City doesn't repel your attention. I don't know if it's very good necessarily, but it actually attracts it. So you're saying these murals are like corporate art, like for businesses and things like that. They're just
there are some. The other side of this would be sort of, there is this program for the fish factories, but the main murals that you'll see in town, the ones that are on people's houses, the ones that are
through the Ole
neighborhoods. Yeah. So those come out of, in 2013, there was this big push, first under Park Geun-hye, but then it was picked up again under President Moon. It was the promotion and support of urban regeneration. And they have all these neighborhoods identified as downwardly mobile. So they aren't the neighborhoods that are just trashed. They aren't just, the neighborhoods that are going to be bulldozed. They're neighborhoods that used to be kind of nice, but aren't nice anymore. And they have all of these rankings for the things that can be done to make these neighborhoods better, to spruce them up. Turns out the cheapest and easiest one is just paint some murals on things. You don't need to fix the sewers. You don't need to fix the road. You can just put up some murals and the score goes up. And so then your neighborhood score goes up, and then the city score goes up, and everybody's score goes up.
It's like a video game.
So they're kind of like camouflage.
Yeah.
Yes. You find the cheat code.
Yes. Yeah. So these are two, because I remember, Jeju, sometimes mind-boggling how much money Jeju has. I remember when they were fixing these neighborhoods up, they were also giving grants to artists to come live in some of these neighborhoods and create art cafes or to do creations. So they were just dropping art grants to people to come stay here, come paint this, come do graffiti over here. Mind-boggling sometimes the money that Jeju allots for these projects.
So
Darryl, definitely. There's so much money that gets passed through different veins, but it's all just. I think what's sort of interesting in the results is it's kind of uncontrolled. It just sort of goes everywhere.
Yes.
And so these aren't consistent murals. There isn't a consistent style or quality. No. It's all over the place.
And you really can see the difference in the painters as well. You could be walking through, like the market down in Tapdong in that neighborhood. And even on, one wall to the other wall, you obviously can see it's not the same painter. And, and the time frame is different because this one looks a little faded while this one is bright and shiny. So it's an ongoing thing, it seems like, anyways. It's never ending. Yeah,
this is fascinating.
Go ahead, Darryl.
Before I get to my next question, I've heard, and maybe this from Joey, I'm not sure where I heard this saying from, that Jeju has the largest mural budget in the world. Is that a myth, or is that just, or a saying? I wouldn't know how to check that.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, there are so many mural villages on the mainland. But the main difference is that they're not as self-focused. They're not as consistent in their theme. So they'll just be sort of random pictures. And actually, I did notice, because I came back last summer for the first time in a couple of years because of COVID, obviously, that had started to become much more prominent in Jeju murals.
Do you mean like our self-promotion of Jeju was much more prominent to you? Oh,
no, just lack of like before every mural had been a Jeju symbol, Jeju iconography. And then now there were just random pictures. And there had been some before, but it was definitely much more frequent.
That's really cool that there's that much of a difference that you actually were able to recognize that. Yeah, that's cool. I'd never think about that.
So talking a little bit more specifically about your research into it, what have you learned about the images of Jeju?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? One of the things that I think is really important to understand about these murals is how they distribute space and how they guide you from one place to another, and the kinds of ways that they ask you to relate to a place like Jeju. Because on the one hand, you're given all these symbols, but these symbols get decontextualized and they get pulled out and they just become kind of repetitive. And so many people that I ask, when I ask them like the murals on Jeju, they're everywhere. And yet most people couldn't name one, or they couldn't, there's the Jeju City Hall mural. And that's very specific because that's before any of this started.
Right.
But these other ones, they don't have a place. They become slippery and they just slide off. And that's exactly the opposite of what a mural is supposed to do, right? Because a mural is a painting that is stuck. It is in place. It doesn't move like a photograph does. Yeah. It asks to be in a place and asks you to join it. So there are a couple murals that, Alexis, you brought up, some of these start to look grungy, but they look in a interesting or beautiful way.
Very, exactly. They look part of now the earth of Jeju. Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's exactly it. When they are given time to breathe, or maybe it's just happenstance, it just happened that they look this way, those start to look really beautiful because they've gotten their place back.
Agreed.
They are one of a kind. They are singular. And the question of what is a tourist place, I think, is really wrapped up in that. Is a tourist place something that is easily consumed and you just slide through Jeju? And, I know so many people who go through there to get the stamp on their passport, especially if they can't go to the mainland and get that Korea stamp. It's just a pure sliding through the place. Or is it a place where you get stuck and a piece of it gets stuck to you and you kind of build a symbiotic relationship?
You're such a poet, Grant. I really like the way you speak. It makes me more intrigued by the murals when you were talking about how it sort of becomes, you're supposed to be a part of the mural. And that I remember, because like you said, they sort of have faded over time. But I remember there was a time when I was driving around the coastal roads and I was stopping to take photos of these murals because I was fascinated on these fish factories. I would just be driving and then all of a sudden, wham, bam, here's this fish factory with this gorgeous faded mural, like you said, and I would be taking photos of them. Now I am the opposite. It is now, like you just said, now for me, I'm just driving by and I almost don't even notice them anymore. You wrote a paper about the invisibility of, did I say that right? The invisibility of these murals. Mm-hmm. And that's really fascinating that, that now it was such a part of my life, photographing them just for fun, and now that I don't even notice them anymore. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't even think that I didn't notice them.
I never noticed the murals myself. Like I never think of Jeju and murals, even though there's an old one in Jungmun on a building here that's really faded, of like the waterfall that's like just down the street. And it's massive and it's all faded. It's not very good. And now that you mention, it's probably just to be like, it's a big building, so let's try to camouflage it. Yeah, really, right?
What I think with the Olays, with the generation of the Olay as well, now you're going through, old farm roads or country roads, and especially when you come to, you'll really notice murals popping up because they're decorating the walls oftentimes of the buildings as you're passing them on the Olay. So that's a whole nother thing. Did you walk the Olays, Grant, when you were here?
Yes, and actually my favorite. Yeah. No, my favorite murals of all time are the ones that are out there, and they are the water tower murals.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes,
On the,
yeah.
in
They
the parks,
are-
in the parks, in the
Mhm.
farms, they're
In the farm.
everywhere, and they have like
They're
sunflowers
everywhere.
on them and things like that.
Yeah.
Why are those your favorite?
Because they are definitely much more in the fish factory mold. They're not just sort of everywhere. They are, for very similar reasons, right? They're covering up industrial equipment that's in the middle of this natural space. But they are so varied. They are, I don't know. There's so many different topics, but they're also much more local. So the fish factories have tons of great iconography, but they're usually water, fish. You know, their content is kind of generic. But you'll see some of the, and it's changing very rapidly. I think they've stopped actually painting the water towers, because now they just paint them green, just sort of simple camouflage. It's just green. But some of the older ones would be very specific to the village, and the villages out there and the farms are sometimes just 100 people. You know, they're very small, they're very local, and I thought that was really cool. That you don't get that anywhere else.
Do you have a favorite one? A favorite mural in Jeju?
I do. It's kind of a heartbreaking story, but it is, to me, it's the mural that has everything. And it's a fish factory in Suwon-ri, and it's one of these invisible murals. It's one of these like very hard to see murals. If you're actually on the coastal road, the fish factory is a little bit back from the road. It's one of the ones that's further away, probably like 200, 300 meters away. So if you're actually looking for it, you won't see it. You won't see that the mural's there till you come around the corner, and then across a couple fields, you'll see this thin line of a mural. And that's what I saw. I said, okay, I got to go over there and see what's up. And as I got closer, there was a huge long wall. I think I've measured it, and it's probably 400 meters of painting. And it had been painted with this not very great paint that wasn't really designed for the weather. And it was mostly blue because it was this fish scene. And when the rebar would sort of seep out, it would put all of these little crackles of orange through the blue. So the color was like an impossible color. It's a color you can't paint, you can't make, you can't buy. It barely fits inside your vision. It's just so shocking and strange. And there were these beautiful gauzy fish that had been painted all over it. The person who made it, and I've been looking for them for years, if anybody listening to this knows about the Suwon-ri mural, let me know. But they just were a very talented painter. And they had put these very beautiful and well done, very complicated naturalistic fish. And, you know, the combination of the sun and the air and the fact that this was so hard to see was really interesting. And I walk around the corner, and there was another stretch of mural, and there was a farmer there. And I asked the farmer what he thought of the mural. And we were standing 2 feet away, and he said, "What mural?" And I was like, every day you're here, and this mural is right next to me. And I was like, I'm sure I'm just using the wrong word, but no, when I find the corner, it's like, oh yeah, the mural. He had just been using it to put his racks up against it, like where they grow the seedlings. And I realized this mural was beautiful because it was kind of the perfect combination of byuk and hwa. It is wall and art. It serves this function as a wall, but it's also art, but it's kind of not both at the same time. Because I came just for the art. The fish factory just cared about the wall. The farmer just cared about a place to lean his rack. And then it must have been 2019. Every year I go back and I visit the mural, and I take tons of pictures, because last time I didn't get everything perfect, and now I need the perfect picture. And I turned the corner, and it was covered with thick black tar. Just all the way down, lines of thick black tar, not the whole thing, but just thick lines that had sealed up the cracks. Because this is not an art gallery. It's a fish factory.
It's a work.
And
yeah.
the walls were rotting and water was pouring through and it was damaging the structural integrity. And so they just needed to fix it. And
wow.
the same thing that was bringing out that impossible color of this orange/blue was also destroying the wall. And so I thought that was everything all at once. That is this incredibly difficult, beautiful moment where you recognize that art is temporary. It's not the kind of thing that lasts forever. And that's what made it in the first place. That's what made it beautiful. But that's also why it had to, it's not gone, but it's why it had to change drastically.
That's fascinating. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most thing that I took from reading your paper and then talking to you in general was just like you said, I guess I mean, you notice murals, but designed for invisibility, you know, that to me is so unique that is the purpose. You know, you, like you said, you don't think a mural is supposed to but to design something to be invisible, to create something so you don't look at it, is just an absolutely fascinating topic.
Yeah.
I can see why you would be obsessed with this for, the years that you have been. Grant, I want you to, when do you have plans to come back sometime soon? Or you got so much going on?
I definitely have to come back. So hopefully October. That's October or January.
Okay. Grant, and I didn't mention this to you because I kind of wanted to just save it. In my neighborhood, I live in a really old school neighborhood in the city, Sosada. And in the last year and a half, and I have no idea, but I'm obsessed, even before I met you and started talking to you, I'm obsessed why my neighborhood has been picked. And it's just two roads. And they are this road and the road I live on are covered in murals now. Absolutely. Sangbangsan, the Brother Islands. I mean, we have paintings, and just Sangbangsan was just, and I wanted to get a picture of the dude, but I was always in a hurry. And I was like, I got to send this to Grant. He just was out there and he threw up this absolutely gorgeous painting in 3 days. And it's Sangbangsan. And the closer you get, the unattractive it is. And then you step back and you're like, this is a magnificent work. But clearly, I have no idea why my neighborhood was picked. I have no idea what the intention, because these are not designed for invisibility. These are very specifically want your attention, but I don't know why. I have no idea why. And why this neighborhood, and why all this money, and why on these walls of these houses, because we have the houses back and we have yards, and then we have the brick walls with the gate that you come into your courtyard, and that's what they're painting. But why? And I'm obsessed with it. So when you come down, I'm going to put you to work. And go.
I just had an idea. I mean, I should probably mention this off air, but we could arrange a me, you, and Jeju tour where Grant can point out some of them. Not to put you on the spot, you can be like, screw that idea.
I was like, we're putting him to work immediately. He hasn't even been. We're like, come on, Grant, let's do this. It's just,
It's
I love getting people to look at them because art can be really beautiful, and that's great, but most art isn't. And so if you want to think about art in your world, you need to be willing to look at the things that aren't beautiful and aren't interesting. And Korea, because of a couple different reasons, one being the law on the mandatory investment in public art. So any big construction has to put, I think, like 0.5% into public art. And because of tourism, has some of the world's greatest collections of bad art and bad public art. So it's always this opportunity to ask, okay, what's really going on here? And Alexis, I'm actually curious because one of the things we haven't talked about is something called crime prevention through environmental design.
Right, the broken window syndrome, the theory. Yeah.
And that is a huge part of the reason that these neighborhoods are targeted for murals, because murals do a couple things. They pre-graffiti. So if you're going to come and paint on a wall, you don't want to do it on the mural wall because the space is sort of already taken up.
Right.
If you do come as a tourist, then, tourists love to leave their names behind. It is a practice that is literally as old as human culture. There are tourist graffitis from 3,500 years ago, but it disrupts that because you come to Jeju and now you have Jeju symbols. It's like, okay, well, I'm kind of disrespecting the place that I want to leave my name behind on, so there's a weirdness. And with the colors, it makes you much more visible to surveillance. Because if you have a dark wall and dark clothes, you can't be seen. But if you have a bright wall, then I know the person standing there.
Holy moly! I didn't even think about that.
Oh, so this is actually isn't the broken window theory. It's different.
It's part of a whole family of things. It is definitely adjacent. It is part of that same way of thinking about it. It's kind of the flip side of that coin, that you do need to make things nicer so that people will not feel a kind of psychological compulsion. But I tend to think that's a little bit overplayed, because there are much more practical and direct reasons why, and the surveillance one, I think, is the most important one. You're
especially on Jeju, because people don't graffiti here. Like it's not really a thing, but the surveillance thing is really interesting because of the small town of these places, and the foreigners, the foreigners as in people not from those towns, walking around. That's a really interesting point. Do you know if that for a fact that was one of the motivations behind some of the murals?
Yes. Yeah, that's part of the official government documents and academic accounts of why the murals specifically are a kind of neighborhood beautification. Because there's a lot of things you can do to make your neighborhood beautiful. Statues are a lot easier to put up, but they don't have all these other features to them.
And now that you're saying this, like, God, now that I think about it, talking about the gaudiness of some of these paintings on the murals in these neighborhoods, now that really kind of makes sense, because, and I don't, I'm not trying to insult any painters, but they are some of them are particularly gaudy. and you're like, why would you do that right here? Why would you make this bright, vibrant, not particularly attractive painting? So that would make sense more. Wow.
I'm definitely going to pay attention more to the murals that go, because like I just blind to them. I don't. Well, just blind.
Yeah. Well, and I used to not be blind to them, but now I feel like I'm driving on kosher roads and I just sort of just like, it just is in the background feature to me now. So obviously. Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. Grant, we were talking about your favorite. I do want to mention for our listeners, I was hoping, and I kind of mentioned this, but I hopefully will get your permission, Grant, but I think we're going to do a contest where it would be great that we are going to throw one of your photos of one of your scenes and have our listeners, and we'll announce more of this on Instagram, but have one of our listeners try to identify where it is on the island.
And the prize will be a hearty handshake from yours truly.
No, we're going to give a prize, but I definitely, because of your topic of them being invisible, I really wanted to kind of change that dynamic and just see, especially because most of our listeners are obviously English speakers and, probably teachers and tourists around. So to see if they notice some of these murals and if it's something that they actually are like, you know what? I know where that one is. So it'll be a really interesting project or, contest.
Now that we're running out of time, but is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't asked, or is anything interesting about the images of Jeju, not necessarily murals?
Well, there's whole sprawling fields that we could get into, but I think the piece that I think is really interesting is what do these images, the murals, but also the photographs and also the tourist brochures, how do they kind of function as an autobiography? Because a lot of them are ways of defining what Jeju is, a way of renaming Jeju or depicting Jeju, and the famous icons of Jeju, Dal Harubang, the Henya, the water carrying woman. Like, these are things that are produced by the pictures that we look at. So when people are looking at the images around them, and especially the images created for tourism. I think it's always important to ask yourself, what is the Jeju that's being created there? Because every one of those images adds to a pile and adds another layer, another residue on Jeju, and it does change the place. And so we should be attentive to and also careful of the kinds of images that we produce or the kinds of images that we casually pass by, but also the kinds of images that tend to actually damage a place or tend to maybe trivialize things that are really important about Jeju by turning them into cartoons. And sometimes cartoons.
I was going to
are great.
say that the art
Yes.
cartoon henyo for sure.
Yes, the cartoon henyo, which is all over. You know what? I actually I would like to ask you one more question, Darryl. How could we?
Yeah, we'll just take a
think it's
quick
a
break
good
right
question.
now. We'll just take a
Okay.
quick break.
Grant, I do
Go
want
to
to,
a
I want to,
commercial.
because I think it's important. And so let's cut to commercial. Let's come right back.
And now we're back with Grant. So thanks again for being with us, Grant. We're talking about the iconography and the images of Jeju, specifically mostly about murals. And we left off with Alexis about to ask a very pertinent question.
Well, because Grant, you were just talking about being careful about what we put into the world per se, right? I am very curious if when these murals are commissioned, is the artist given the choice with what they put up, or is each neighborhood says to the artist, this is the purpose, this is what we want from you, or are they given a choice? Do you know?
Yes. So there are some places like Dumengi Alley. Are you familiar with Dumengi Alley in Jeju? So that is heavily artist pitched. Dumengi Alley is this big, that is definitely not a mural village that you're supposed to not see. You are supposed to see the giant red lips glued to the side of a house.
Look at Darryl's face. He's like, what?
That's not a jigmoon. I have no idea what this thing is. Yeah.
It's a very garish, wild carnival in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Kind of mural village concept, the kind of thing that was in like Iwa in Seoul. But for the neighborhood murals, it used to be very top down, and the neighborhood council who was in charge of the money would decide.
Okay.
And residents were getting pretty upset because it was their houses that were being painted.
And their neighborhoods that they see
them.
every day. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So over the last 10 years, there's been a pretty strong shift toward a combination of the neighborhood will pick a bunch of topics, and then the homeowners will they'll contribute to that. Then the artist will come and they'll make some pitches for, okay, you said you wanted you said you wanted a Halasan mural. Okay, so this is what I would do for a Halasan, or this is my drawing. And sometimes the homeowners have a lot of power. I've seen some. I was at a mural painting where the older woman who lived there just brought out a picture of her grandson playing with the dog and was like, "This is what you're going to paint. You're going to paint my family portrait on the wall." I don't really care about the neighborhood list of approved images. This is the one that I want.
Oh my God, that's funny.
That's awesome.
Okay.
So sometimes it leans all the way that way. Sometimes it's just, I talked to a couple homeowners. They're like, I just don't care. Just make it nice. Just put whatever you want on there.
Okay. So it really depends on the neighborhood. Yeah. Okay.
It really depends on the neighborhood. And you will be able to tell the kinds of murals where they're commissioned from higher up. The higher up they are, the more it's like there's an artist involved. The ones where you start to see plaques. There's a little plaque with a name. Then it's maybe a little higher up than just the neighborhood administration.
It's designed
the Jeju
more
culture. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm really interested in the fact that the murals, like what you said before about we have to be careful about, because they're going to be an autobiography. They're going to actually there's this probably aspect of it dictating the character of Jeju and of these places, as opposed to the people who live in them now dictating what the places
What
actually
gets-
are. It's
Well, and then
fascinating.
and then even going to that, like, does the artist want their name on it? Or they're just like, this wasn't designed for art. Like you're saying, there's not that, like they're like, no, this is just paying my bills. This isn't one. Because my neighborhood, I'm like looking out the window as if you could see it. My neighborhood is specifically, oh my God, my brain sometimes just shuts off, is scenery, Jeju scenery. Oh, I think we're frozen. Yeah.
No,
So it's
no,
very
it's not moving.
it's very specific. And I would say there's no placards. So, but I would say that this is an artist. This is his forte. He is very good at what he does. And you can tell that, with what his interpretation of Sangbang-san is absolutely gorgeous. And like I said, when you get up close to it, I'm like, I don't, like, it's so crazy how a mural changes when you're up close to it and you're like, well, this is really just not, but then you take 5 steps back and it is absolutely gorgeous. He's got like wispy fog and clouds that go, but when you stand next to it and you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Oh, it's really, really interesting. Yeah. Wow, Grant, you have opened my all these like little details are now coming into my head about like, why would they have chosen this or this or this or yeah. Yeah.
In that vein, this will probably have to be our last question, but in that vein, I mean, it's probably.
No. Yeah.
Are there any
a lot of Grant's time.
Images that concern you when it comes to this autobiography of Jeju?
There are some that I have been particularly bothered by, but I think those usually kind of fizzle out because people don't pick up the ones that are, I don't even know how to articulate it. One that really immediately bothered me was when somebody combined the Jeju pig and the Hee-ryong. And it wasn't just that it wasn't that it was calling the Hee-ryong pigs or anything. It was just like these are two parts
different
of Jeju iconography that are separate, and mixing them kind of muddles the thing that makes Jeju interesting, which is that sometimes it's the same people doing both jobs, but that there is this split, there is this separation. So at the image level, that felt sort of weird and just wrong. But I think the deeper issue is we all have kind of images of our homes or images of the place that we live lingering in the back of our heads. But what has happened because of the huge investment in murals is that every single image and every single symbol on Jeju has been unearthed and brought to the surface. And I have talked to cultural workers and to mural painters who talk about going through old books and resurrecting symbols that nobody remembers. They're from 150 years ago. And they try and do a cultural production around them. But that's how far it's gone, is that all of the symbols that there can be of Jeju right now have been unearthed and are just on the surface. So people don't have the kind of private access to these symbols that they might have. They don't have the access to them that isn't explicit, that isn't defined, that isn't, there isn't anything hazy in the back of the head anymore because it's all on the surface. And I think that can be really dangerous because then it's not yours. It isn't local anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a threat that that these murals and how they're coming up and how there's been like such a period of them being built, is there a threat to future icons and future images of Jeju being like snuffed out?
I think there can be a kind of repetitive element to it, but I have I take great comfort in the brutal sea air and the squalls and the typhoons and the sun, that, just as much as these things unearth and render sort of everyday and boring, they also have this huge opportunity to become something different, to mutate. And there's definitely mutations that have happened that I've even seen since I first came to Jeju of symbols interconnecting. The bad one might be the the pig and the henya, but the orange and the harabang, like
Yes.
That's fascinating.
and all of a sudden there's
Yes.
orange harabangs all
Yes.
over the place, right?
Okay.
That's something I didn't see when I first came there. So there's
Wow.
also these intermixings, which, that's maybe not the greatest icon in the world, but it at least shows that there's always this cross-pollination that's building around these things.
And, from a metaphorical point of view, when you talk about how the island actually is contributing to the creation of these murals just by the weather, just by battering it, no matter what you put up there, in a way, Jeju will reclaim it.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. I hope Jeju, we were talking about like what bothers you. You know what really bothers me is that when we mentioned it earlier, is the cartoon. I really, really do not enjoy the cartoon Henyo or the cartoon Dal Holdabangs. I don't know what about it. I don't know what about it really gets under my skin. Maybe because Jeju itself is so beautiful that I don't find it attractive to change the images into that sort of way. It really gets under my skin, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I think there is one cartoon, and it's probably one of the most prominent painters of murals that you'll see around Jeju, which I think is really interesting, and I would love to know more. It's a painting company, Jeju Byakwa, and it is a husband and wife team, and they paint a lot of the murals around schools, and they're very cartoony, but they're also very historical, and they're very pedagogical and very educational. And when I talked to him, he was busy painting. He did not want to talk to me at all. He did not want to let me sit there for 2 weeks and watch him do his work. But while we were just talking for a few minutes, they do not want to be paid attention to because they're just doing their job.
They're just doing the job, yeah.
But I asked, what I don't even remember the question, but he answered that he was doing storytelling. And he was doing storytelling in the traditional Jeju sense of keeping culture alive by talking. And yet he does this in this very cartoony way.
Yeah.
And so this isn't the kind of the cartoons that you're talking about.
Right.
But it is, to me, a great example of how, in some ways, these are mutations of traditional Jeju practices, like retelling the old stories, but this time doing it on murals and for school children and in places where maybe the tourists aren't going to know. Maybe the tourist eyes will slide over, but the locals' eyes will say, I actually know that story, and that's my family's story, or that's my town's story.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, it's so good to talk to you, Grant. It really does just open up the world again of all these, because like you said, they're all over Jeju.
And now it's time we get to our final segment of the Jeju 5, which is when we're going to ask you 5 questions, rapid fire. Answer them about your likes and dislikes about Jeju Island. Okay, so
I like this with Grant because he's got this tourist perspective, because Grant never lived here for, you spent a lot of time here, but this will be interesting.
So where on the island do you like to go to get away?
AWOL.
Oh, okay. Number 2, what is your go-to beverage of choice at the Marts? Is it soju, makgeolli, or beer?
Or anything.
Or anything, sure.
Definitely beer.
Okay.
And beer.
I'm too old. The hangovers are too hard.
Any type of beer? Height, Cass, the new IPAs that show up?
I came to Korea long enough ago that there was only Height and Cass.
Yes.
So I end up drinking Jeju beer, partly because the cans are pretty.
They're so cool. They're so cool. Yeah.
And you're talking to part owners of the company?
Yes. We invested.
I know this. Yes.
Okay. Next question. The coast, Hala or Autumn?
Autumn.
Okay. Oh, me too. I'm an Autumn person. Now this might be kind of pointless question, but what's something you know about Jeju that most others don't? Would it be the murals?
Yes, it would be the murals. What else do I know? I know that there's always a mural around the corner. if you keep your eyes out, there will be another mural somewhere in almost every town.
Yeah.
And there is no end to them. When I originally came, I was going to document every mural, and I very quickly realized that was
never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. Okay.
If there was one thing about Jeju you would change, what would it be?
Easier and safer bike routes.
Good answer.
Okay.
Well,
Grant, such a pleasure to be talking to you. Such a pleasure. Thank you we definitely took a lot of your time.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
No, this
thank
was great.
you. Yeah. And we'll talk to you off air later about when you come back, and we'll do a BU and Jeju mural tour. I think that's a great idea. If you agree, of course. We're not going to force you to do something you don't want to do.
I hope this episode, I hope our listeners really open our eyes again if it's something that they've kind of not been paying attention to see what's out there now. Yeah. So thank you so much, Grant.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Grant Leuning, PhD candidate at UC San Diego. That was fantastic. Blew my mind.
Wow. I know. I was just thinking in my head, like, it was one of our longer interviews, but for me, it was, I was just getting educated about everything he was saying. I was just like listening to it, and it was more pleasurable for me than I kind of forgot that we were recording and that it's going to go out to the world. Like, I was just like, tell me more, Grant, tell me more about this fascinating. Who would think to even study that? And he's so knowledgeable about it. Like, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, as like a media dude myself, I find the idea of like the medium, the message is really fascinating. So talking about how the murals influence the town and the town influences the murals and who they're for is
well, and I mentioned it in the podcast. He has such a way of speaking. He's like it's kind of like poetry, the way he just sort of describes, anyways, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I could go on about that, but the end result is I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and so everyone pay attention. We'll iron out the details of this contest, which I was kind of unaware of, but it works. It's cool. We can do it.
I knew in my head, I was just like, so we'll be giving you have to pay attention to our social media. That's where we're going to do it this time, because it's going to be based on a picture of a mural, but we'll be giving away our second Save Jeju Bada box / table camping box. So that'll be
very
fun.
great.
So if you're not following us on all the amazing social media that we put a lot of effort into, oh, hey, look at that. So if you're not following us, do give us a follow on Facebook, on Instagram. We put a lot of effort and work into our social media and the educational aspect of it. So
and Twitter,
give us a follow.
Twitter
and Twitter. Gosh, Darryl, you're the
news.
You do a lot of, I basically get my Jeju news from you. So that's great. So give us a follow in all those ways. And, and we'll be back. We'll be back in May with our next episode.
Yeah. And so music, as always, is Jason Lisco. Our art, Sarah Hodgkiss. Our internet guru is Ted. We should get his man. Yeah, we need to get his business name and just put it on the YouTube. So
my God, he's done a lot of help. He's helped us so much.
Check it out. Check out our website. It's up. It's running. It's beautiful. meyouandjeju.com.
Oh, he did. It looks really good. And so when we refer to things like like these links or these articles, we have now decided to throw them on our website, and you can very easily access them. It looks beautiful. So we have all the educational articles, anything we talk about in an episode, you can go to that episode and get direct links to what we're mentioning and what we're referring to.
Yeah. And so please check it out. Email us if there's any issues with it, but I don't think there are. Ted has actually asked for that. Feedback. So if there's any feedback.
It looks so good. Yeah.
It's incredible. So I'm Darryl.
Next time. Yeah.
I'm
Alexis.
Bye.
Bye.